And here we go. Okay, trying to turn your favorite part of history against you. All right, see you later, Miguel. Okay, so we had our quick breakout. We talked about the definition of pi. We talked about the formula for circumference. That's going to be what we want to take with us out of the breakout. Area and circumference of circles is the main thing we're talking about today. We want to be able to find area and circumference if you're given the radius or the diameter. And you also want to be able to use area and circumference to find the diameter or the radius. It's like if you're given area, I could ask you for the radius, that sort of thing. So that's where we are headed. Let's go ahead and get started. So go ahead and grab your notes. And here we go. 11.1, area and circumference. So we've talked a bit about the definition of circumference already. So moving along from there, we talked about the formula. Circumference is pi times diameter. And then someone also put out there, circumference would be 2 pi times the radius, because kind of in a little note to self here, we should already from yesterday have that the radius is half the diameter, or that the diameter is 2 times the radius. So if I wanted to take this original equation and replace it with 2 times the radius instead of diameter, this is what we get. So it doesn't really matter which equation we use for circumference. Each one is useful in its own right for different things. Depends on what you're given in the problem. So we're going to do some examples of how we would use diameter or radius to get circumference, and how we would use circumference to get diameter and radius. Okay, so no worries, Christy. First example, given diameter. We're going to say diameter is 12 centimeters, and we want to find circumference. Okay. So then the first thing we do is we grab our equation that uses diameter. Circumference is pi times diameter. And then we just take the value for diameter that we have and plug it in. So that would be pi times 12. And then the proper way to write the answer if it involves pi is to write it as 12 pi. This is one possible answer, 12 pi centimeters. This is considered exact form. So if you think back to when we did square roots and things like that in the Pythagorean theorem, if we were asked for something in exact form, that meant to like leave the square root in it. Here, it's the same idea. If we're asked for exact form, that means leave the pi in it. But if you're asked for a rounded answer, you can put it into a calculator. And most calculators have pi buttons. So if, like on this calculator, for example, I know it's kind of hard to see the screen itself, but you can see the buttons, right? Maybe, if they're not too tiny. So in my calculator, I can type 12 times pi. This is my pi button. On some calculators, it's over here, and on some, it's also a secondary function. So on your calculator, you might have to hit second, and then whatever button has pi written above it. So it really depends. I'll also show on Desmos how you get it in just a moment. But there we go. 12 times pi is 37.699. Or if I'm rounding it to the nearest 2 decimal places, nearest hundredth, that would be 37.70, which is oftentimes what you'll be asked to round to, either the nearest tenth or the nearest hundredth. So this is also the answer to that same question. It's just a rounded answer. So whichever answer you choose to use, it depends on what you were asked for in the problem. Okay. So that's how we do it if we're given the diameter. I'm going to show on Desmos really quick where the pi button and everything is. So if you click on Desmos and you open a window of that, on the keyboard down here, you'll notice that there is a pi button. So you could type 12 pi, and it will tell you what 12 times pi is. But if you prefer to type, you can also type the number 12 and then the letters pi, and it turns it into a pi, which is kind of nice. That's what I tend to do because going down here and hunting for the pi key is usually not as fast as typing the letters pi. But whichever way you'd like to do it is fine. Just a nice feature. So anyways, that's how we find pi on Desmos. And the other way is how we find pi on a regular calculator. Your cell phone calculator, if you flip it sideways, has a pi button as well. But again, just like with Trig, I recommend using either a Desmos app, the Desmos online one, or some other app that has a good calculator, or a regular calculator. The calculator your cell phone comes with is nice, but not amazing for some of these things because it doesn't show everything. Like it doesn't show all the steps. Like it doesn't leave 12 pi up there. It automatically changes it into this number. So you can't really see what you did. But anyway, enough about calculators. Unless, of course, you have a question about the calculator. That's what we do if we're given the diameter. Any questions from that example? Any numbers we're not sure where they came from or anything like that? Okay. Then, next example. This time, given the radius. And you're going to find that we do something very similar here. Let's say the radius is 3 inches, and we want to find circumference. This time, we're going to use the circumference equation that deals with the radius. So this time we want to use circumference is 2 pi r. Or you could use pi times diameter and just find the diameter before you start the problem. That would be totally fine as well. But in this case, all we have to do 2 pi times 3. And then if I was looking for the exact answer, I would just do 2 times 3, which is 6. And we'd get 6 pi inches for the exact answer. Or we can put it into the calculator. 6 times pi is 18.85 approximately. Okay, so now we've got it if we've been given the diameter or if we've been given the radius. The last thing we're going to do with circumference is what happens if we are given the circumference instead and asked to find the radius or the diameter. Okay. So given the circumference, this time we're going to say the circumference is 126 meters. And we want to know what is the diameter and what is the radius. Okay. So we know circumference is equal to pi times diameter. So I'm going to take the circumference that I've been given and plug it in for c. So in my equation, this is now going to look like 126 equals pi times diameter. And to solve this equation, the thing that we want to remember, so something we should be kind of thinking about, remember that pi is just a number. So we're going to treat it like a number in an equation. Because if I had something like 126 equals 4 times d, I would divide by 4 on both sides to get d by itself. It's the same idea using pi. I'm going to divide by pi on both sides to get d by itself because it cancels out the pi. And then this is something I can type into the calculator. So into my calculator, I would type 126 divided by pi, which would give me 40.11 for the diameter. And then I would just take diameter divided by 2 equals the radius. So 40.11 divided by 2, which is 20.06 if you round it, for the radius. So now we found radius and diameter from the circumference. Any questions from any of the examples we've done so far? Anything we need to go back to? Okay, then I'm gonna have you guys try a couple before we move on. So you try. First one, diameter is 46 feet. We want to find the circumference. And then the second one that you can't see quite yet, we're going to say the circumference is 48 inches. Find the diameter and the radius. When you think you've got it, type circumference in the chat. Faith thinks she might have it. You're on the right track. If you started with C equals pi times diameter and plugged in 46 for diameter in the first one, plugged in 48 for circumference in the second one. Oops. Philip thinks he has the second one. Awesome. Go ahead and round to 2 decimal places for your answers. Anyone think they got the first one? And if so, what'd you get? What is pi times 46? All right, thanks, guys. A couple people responded with 144.51. I would agree with that. Pi times 46, sticking that into the calculator, 144.51. And that would be feet. All right, second one. Philip, you said you've got it. What'd you get? All right, 15.2 for the diameter or 7.6 for the radius. Anyone agree, disagree? If we're rounding to more than one decimal place, be a little bit careful there. Because you are right, it does start off with 15.2, but it rounds to 15.28 if we're going to two decimal places. I know I didn't really specify up here. And that was inches. And then the radius does start with 7.6, but I'm going to keep one more decimal place on there. 7.64 inches for the radius. All right. Nice job. That is everything we need about circumference. So now we're going to jump into area, since we also have that today. So jumping into area next. And there's actually kind of a fun little website widget that I found on the internet that does a better job of drawing this picture than I usually do. Most years I try to draw this picture when we talk about area of a circle. And you guys know my drawing skills from last week with trig. They're not amazing. So this is going to be a much better picture than the one that I usually draw. And this helps us to derive and think about the formula for area. And it's actually kind of cool. So if I take a circle here and I straighten out the circumference, I know the circumference, 2 pi r. That's what we're going to use in this case because we want it to be based off of the radius. So circumference is equal to 2 pi r. So if I were to take this thing and roll it out all the way, we get a length that is 2 pi r units long. And actually, I'm going to stick this link in the chat so you guys can play with it too if you want to. Then we click on this checkbox where it says dissect. And it cuts the circle up into a whole bunch of little pieces. And what we're going to do is using this little slider bar is we're going to take all of these little pieces and lay them out along the length of the circle. So now we've taken all of this, these slices represent the area of the circle, if you were to put them all together, and we lay it out along the length. Then, so this whole length here is 2 pi r. If I take the slider bar and slide it all the way across, we're going to take these pieces and it's going to fit them in between the other ones, kind of like teeth. So now we have that this side length here is half of the circumference. So 2 pi r, half of that is just pi times the radius. So this length here is pi times radius. And this whole shape looks almost kind of like something we could take the area of. It almost looks like a rectangle, right? It's like a kind of a tilted, bumpy rectangle. And for a rectangle, we might remember that the area is length times width. So this length is pi times the radius. This width is the radius. So pi times r would be what seems to be the area of this thing, which is pi r squared, which is the formula for area of a circle. And notice, if I make this circle cut up into smaller and smaller parts, we get closer and closer to looking like a rectangle when I put the pieces together. If I have 200 parts, it looks almost exactly like a rectangle. And I can pull it apart and, you know, bend it back into a circle if I want to. So anyway, that's how you kind of derive the area of a circle. You approximate a rectangle with it. So pi r squared is our area of a circle formula. And I thought this was an interesting little website that you could use to see it visually instead of trying to draw it or anything like that. So anyway, there we go. That leads us into what we're talking about next, which is area. So that link's in the chat. Feel free to take a look at it more later. I will post it along with the notes today, so you guys can continue playing around with it if you want to. It is kind of fun. But looking back at our notes now, going back to talking about area. So we have our formula, area equals pi times the radius squared. All right. So we're going to do a couple quick examples with this, just like we did with the circumference stuff, and then we'll be done. So first example for area. This time we're going to be given the radius. So let's say the radius is 10 centimeters. We want to find the area. And we know that area is pi r squared. So I'm just going to take 10 and stick it in there for the radius. So pi times 10 squared. And 10 squared is 100, so it's really pi times 100, or 100 pi if we're leaving it as the exact answer. Or if we round it, 100 times pi is 314.16. And this is centimeters squared because it's area this time. So anytime you find area, your units are squared. Okay. Any questions with that one? Any numbers we're not sure where they came from or anything like that? Okay. Then this time we're going to be given diameter. And my dog is very excited about it. So the diameter, this time we're going to say diameter is 4 feet. We're finding area. And unlike circumference, there's not an extra equation that we use when we're given diameter instead of radius or something like that. If you're given diameter and trying to find the area of a circle, find the radius first. So if the diameter is 4 feet, the radius is 2 feet. And we know area is pi r squared, and it becomes just like the one that we had above. Pi times 2 squared, which is 4 pi if we're doing exact form. Or if you type 4 times pi into the calculator, you get approximately 12.57, and this would be square feet. Okay. So those are kind of the two more simple examples. The last one we're going to see today is if we're given the area, we want to be able to find the radius, the diameter, and then even the circumference. So for this one, we are being told area is 42 centimeters squared. And we want to know what is the radius, what is the diameter, and what is the circumference. Okay. So looking for radius, diameter, circumference. First thing we do, we know our equation for area, pi r squared. And we know what the area is, it's 42. So we plug in 42 equals pi r squared. And this one's going to start off just like when we were given circumference and asked to find the radius or the diameter. we start off by dividing by pi on both sides. But before I actually do this division in the calculator, I'm going to go one more step. So we have 42 divided by pi is equal to r squared. Remembering back from the last unit, we were talking about squaring things, the Pythagorean theorem and all of that. How do I undo a square? Who remembers? Yeah, exactly. Square root. So if I take the root of both sides, then we should be good to go. So I want to type this entire thing into the calculator. Just like that. So into the calculator we go. Square root of 42 divided by pi, and that should all be underneath the root. And we get 3.66 is what this rounds to for the radius. So there's part of our answer. We found the radius. Then to get the diameter, that's just 2 times the radius, so 2 times 3.66, which gives us 7.32. And then lastly, finding the circumference, pi times diameter, so just pi times 7.32 into the calculator, which gives me 22.996, a bunch of other stuff. If I'm going to round this to just 2 decimal places, the 6 rounds the 9 up, but then there's another 9. And so this whole thing actually, even if I'm rounding to 2 decimal places, rounds to 23. And that was centimeters. These would all be in centimeters. Okay. So that is the last kind of problem that we need to know how to do today. I'm going to have you guys try 1 or 2, and then we will get the assignment and skedaddle on out of here. And yes, I did just say the word skedaddle. All right. First one, diameter is 14 inches. Find the area. Second one, area is 126 square feet. Find the radius, diameter, and circumference. Take a moment, give it a try. When you think you've got it, type "got it" in the chat. And I will work on getting the homework out there for you. If you started off the first one by deciding that the radius is 7, you're on the right track. And on the second one, if you started it off with 126 equals pi r squared, you're on the right track. Okay, since we are running short on time here, 153.94 inches is approximately, or square inches is what we should get for the first one. And then for the second one, dividing by pi on both sides. And then taking the square root on both sides. We should get about 6.33 for the radius. And then diameter is twice that, so diameter would be 12.66, since that's 2 times 6.33. And then the circumference would be pi times 12.66, since it's pi times diameter, which is about 39.77, and that is feet. For all three of those would be feet. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns before we get the homework? Okay. Then today's assignment is a little bit different looking than we have had previously, and hopefully it will assign here. Come on, internet, you can do it. First sign of madness, cheering on the internet, but it did it. Okay. So today's assignment, if you had me last quarter, you might recognize this type of assignment. It is a pixel art assignment. So if you click on it, it will open up a separate one for each of you. And there it goes, loading. Okay, so the questions are all on sheet 2. The answers are going to be put here. So the instructions, look at the problems on sheet 2. Put the answers in the boxes that correspond with that question. And as you go, if you get the correct answers, it will reveal a picture over here. And you're going to round all of your answers to the nearest hundredth. So that's 2 decimal places. So looking at sheet 2, we have 20 problems over here. And it tells you like diameter is 12, find the area. Or the radius is 14, find the circumference, stuff like that. So doing the first one real quick, if we know that the diameter is 12, and we're looking for area, well, that means that the radius is 6. And if area is pi r squared, that would be pi times 6 squared, which is 36 pi. And then in the calculator, 36 pi is 113.09733, a bunch of stuff. So if I was rounding to 2 decimal places, I'm looking at the 7, which tells me to round the 9 up. And 9 rounds up to 10, so 113.10 would be my answer rounded to 2 decimal places. Since it's a spreadsheet, it will automatically round you to 1 decimal place if you have 0 as your last one, and that's okay. It'll give you the right thing here. So 113.10 is what I would type in that answer box. And it populates it with some of the pixels. So every time you get a correct answer, more pixels will show up until you get a whole picture. Any questions about the homework? Okay. Then I will post an exit ticket in a few minutes. Otherwise, you are free to go. If you have questions, feel free to stick around and ask them.